A dark car rolls into the quiet coastal town of Castle Rock, Maine. Not long after, Nettie and Polly, who work at the local diner, notice someone setting up a new shop across the street. They watch from behind the blinds, curious. Just then, Sheriff Alan Pangborn taps the window and startles Nettie, then laughs and plays with the dog tied outside. Inside the diner, he asks Nettie if Polly is there. When she says yes, he shows her a ring he's planning to propose. After placing his order, Nettie brings over a newspaper and points out a full-page ad for the new store, Needful Things. Alan asks who's behind it. Polly explains that nobody knows much. The owner is new in town. Elsewhere in town, a curious teenager named Brian Rusk notices an open sign on a new shop and decides to go inside. There, he meets the owner, Leland Gaunt, who tells him everything in the store is for sale. When Brian asks where he's from, Leland says he came from Akron, Ohio. As they look out the window together, they see Wilma and Pete, who run a local turkey farm. Brian quietly mentions that Wilma isn't exactly stable. After chatting a bit, Brian admits he's always wanted a Mickey Mantle baseball card. Leland steps into the back room to check. At the same time, Alan asks Polly to marry him and gives her a ring. She says yes. Back in the shop, Leland returns with a 1,956 Mickey Mantle card, oddly signed, to my good friend Brian. When Brian holds it, he feels a jolt and sees a vision of a home run. Leland then asks how much Brian is willing to pay. The boy admits he only has 95 cents. Leland takes the coins and says it will cover part of the cost. The rest, he explains, can be paid by doing a small favor, just a harmless prank on Wilma. Later that day, Leland flips to a new page in a notebook, writes down Brian's name, and labels it Castle Rock. At the police station, Selectman Danforth Keaton argues with Officer Norris Ridgwick over a parking ticket. Norris explains that Danforth parked in a spot reserved for people with disabilities. Danforth gets upset when Norris calls him Buster, a nickname he dislikes, especially since it's what locals use behind his back. Sheriff Allen walks in and breaks up the argument. Tired of the constant squabbles in town, he sighs and says he thought life here would be calmer than working in the city, but it hasn't been. Meanwhile, Polly encourages Nettie, who's shy, to bring an apple pie to the new shop as a welcome gift. At the store, Nettie's dog starts barking when Wilma shows up. Instead of speaking to the sheriff like she usually does, Wilma threatens the dog. When Leland refuses to ask Nettie to leave, Wilma and her husband storm out without buying anything. Afterward, Leland thanks Nettie and asks if she baked the pie. She nods and says she used apples from Mayflower's orchard. As she looks around, Nettie spots a small figurine and mentions she once had the same kind a long time ago. To Nettie's surprise, Leland mentions that he knows her husband died from a knife wound, but gently adds that he doesn't believe she was responsible. As she holds the small figurine, a quick jolt runs through her fingers. A memory flashes back. Her husband George once slapped her, and the same figurine had shattered when she dropped it. Shaken, Nettie says she should get back to work. Leland offers to let her keep the figurine if she plays a simple trick on Danforth, a frequent customer at the diner. Later that day, Brian bikes over to the turkey farm and scoops mud into a bucket. Not far away, Sheriff Allen visits the shop. He tells Leland he doesn't need to buy anything, already has what he wants in life. But he's caught off guard when the shopkeeper brings up his recent engagement. At the same time, Brian throws mud all over Wilma's clean laundry as it hangs in the sun. Back in the store, the two men find common ground. Both are from elsewhere. Leland says he's from Akron, and Alan says he came from Pittsburgh. When asked why he moved, Alan quietly admits that once, in a moment of anger, he hit someone harder than he meant to. That evening, Reverend Rose passes by the Catholic Church and replaces its sign about an upcoming event with one of his own, hinting at a subtle tension between the town's two churches. At the church, Father Meehan shows Sheriff Allen a troubling note. He thinks it came from Reverend Rose, who disapproves of the church's charity events involving games of chance. Meanwhile, Wilma finds her laundry covered in mud. Angry, she immediately blames Nettie, still upset about their earlier argument over the dog. She calls the diner and threatens Nettie, promising to get back at her. At the local bar, the bartender Henry tells a drunk man named Hugh to leave after he keeps kicking the jukebox. On his way out, Hugh rants to Selectman Danforth about being watched by the government. As Hugh passes by Needful Things, a jacket in the window catches his eye. It looks just like the one he wore back in high school. He goes inside and tells Leland it brings back memories. When Leland drapes it over his shoulders, Hugh recalls driving with his friends and feeling free. Leland urges him to keep the jacket, saying it could help him feel like his old self again. Then, he casually asks if Hugh knows Nettie. Hugh says yes, adding that many believe she had something to do with her husband's death. When Hugh asks about the price, Leland doesn't give a number. Instead, he quietly flips open a small pocket knife. The following day, Reverend Rose visits the shop and asks Leland what church he attends. Leland replies that he doesn't belong to any. His business welcomes everyone. He then gestures toward a painting on the wall and makes a light-hearted comment about the Reverend's taste. Father Meehan stops by Needful Things and notices a chalice displayed in the window. At the diner, Polly doesn't realize Leland is still inside as she's getting ready to close. He enters quietly with a stranger and introduces him, but Polly, kindly refusing a handshake, explains she has arthritis. Elsewhere, Danforth pulls out a gun when he hears someone enter his office, only to relax when he sees it's Sheriff Allen. The sheriff questions him about a meeting set by state auditors. Danforth admits he's taken money from the town's petty cash to pay off gambling debts from horse racing. When Allen asks how much, Danforth confesses, 20-0. Allen gives him 4 days to return the money or face the consequences. As Polly walks by, she spots the two men talking through the window and wonders what's going on. The next day, Leland reminds Brian that his part of their agreement isn't done yet, then casually tosses him an apple. Later on, Danforth visits the shop and buys a small horse racing game. Leland claims it can predict winners, and Danforth, desperate for a way out, believes him. At the diner, Wilma loudly threatens Nettie's dog, upsetting everyone around. Leland steps outside to check on Nettie and offers her some comfort. At the same time, Danforth sets up the horse racing game he bought. He names each piece after the real horses running that day and writes down who he thinks will win. When his wife, Myrtle, knocks on the door, he snaps at her to leave him alone. The next day, Nettie keeps her dog at home while she runs an errand for Leland. Meanwhile, Brian rides his bike to the turkey farm, carrying a box of apples from the Mayflower orchard. He throws them through Wilma's window, breaking things in her kitchen and leaving a mess behind. Later, Hugh sneaks into Nettie's house and uses the knife he got from Leland to harm her dog. At the same time, Nettie breaks into Danforth's home and covers it with fake violation notices, each one signed by Officer Norris. While Nettie is still inside the house, Danforth returns, but she manages to slip out without being seen. When she arrives back home, Nettie opens a closet and screams. Her dog has been brutally killed. That evening, Wilma finds her kitchen wrecked, glass and apples scattered everywhere. Just as she grabs a meat cleaver to head out, she turns and sees Nettie standing in the doorway. Nettie believes Wilma hurt her dog. Wilma is sure Nettie ruined her kitchen. The two women argue and things quickly turn violent. Both grab knives and the fight moves upstairs. It ends when Nettie charges at Wilma by the window. They crash through the glass and fall from the roof. Neither survives. Elsewhere, Leland calmly checks off both their names in his notebook. Later, Polly visits the shop and tells Leland she's looking for something to ease her arthritis. Just then, Danforth enters in a panic. Leland sends him upstairs to wait. He then places an old Egyptian necklace around Polly's neck. As soon as it touches her skin, the pain disappears, and she is filled with warmth and desire, imagining a moment of closeness with Leland. When Danforth comes back down, he tells Leland everything that happened and admits he's thinking about harming Norris. Leland advises against it. He says it's not the right time and takes Danforth's gun, saying he's only trying to protect him and that a moment for redemption is coming soon. At the scene of the fight, Sheriff Allen questions Brian about what he might know. Though Brian feels guilty, he lies and says he doesn't know anything. The next day, Deputy Norris shows the others a pocket knife found near Nettie's house. Alan, however, thinks someone else is responsible for hurting her dog and throwing the apples. Later, Norris finds a small gift bag on his desk. When he reaches inside, a mousetrap snaps on his fingers. Inside is a note mentioning the disabled parking spot, leading him to believe Danforth left it as a cruel joke. Alan finds Brian near the lighthouse, upset and holding a gun. Brian calls Leland a monster and warns Alan to stay away from the store. Alan stops him from harming himself. That night, Father Meehan slashes Hugh's truck tires. At the bar, Henry kicks Hugh out again. Hugh blames Henry for the flat tires. At the diner, Alan tells Polly Brian is alive but in the hospital. He admits the town feels more dangerous now. Leland gives Hugh a shotgun to deal with Henry. At Polly's, Alan warns her the necklace she wears is dangerous, but she doesn't listen. Alan then learns from Norris that Leland never owned a store and is a fraud behind recent events. The sheriff goes to Needful Things and breaks in when no one answers. Polly shocks herself scratching the necklace, and her pain returns when it falls. Leland appears, puts it back on, charges 20 in a favor, and says Alan and Danforth are stealing town money. He tells her to check Alan's boat, then kisses her goodbye. Meanwhile, Alan finds old newspapers in the store basement but misses crates of explosives nearby. Polly finds cash on her fiancé's boat, proving Leland's claims. At the station, Alan shows Norris old newspapers and says Leland was behind major disasters. Polly calls Alan, wrongly accusing him of theft, but Alan says Leland planted the idea. Danforth crashes into Norris's car. They fight until Alan handcuffs Danforth. Danforth knocks out Norris and hits his head on the car. Alan finds Polly's engagement ring on the money, realizing she ended things. Danforth calls Myrtle for tools to remove handcuffs. After freeing himself, Danforth accuses Myrtle of cheating and attacks her with a hammer. Danforth cleans blood from his hands and breaks a mirror in anger. He calls Leland and admits he shot his wife. Leland says he's unsure of his actions but invites Danforth for a surprise. Later, Hugh enters the bar with a shotgun just as Henry fires both die. Danforth hides explosives near the church. Leland scolds him for praying and says he'll get his wish soon. Police arrive. Norris apologizes for letting Danforth escape. Alan tells Father Meehan he thinks Leland is evil, but the priest disagrees. Suddenly, an explosion rocks the church. The bombs Danforth planted have gone off. Both men are hurt slightly, and the priest grows sure Reverend Rose caused the trouble. Lightning strikes the church, nearly hitting Father Meehan. The town falls into chaos with fighting and stealing. Danforth aims a rifle at Alan from a window. Norris says the Baptist group is angry because their church was burned. Alan sees Father Meehan and Reverend Rose fighting and stops them at gunpoint. Leland watches and dares Alan to shoot. Alan fires into the air, calming the crowd. He tells them to see through Leland's lies. Alan explains to Cora that Brian tried to warn him but got caught like others. Leland feeds on people's anger and fear. Polly realizes Leland tried to divide her, and Alan then throws off the necklace. Frank admits sending the note. Cora gave Norris the mousetrap, and the priest and Reverend confess their actions. Leland claims he only sold items and doesn't control the town anymore. The sheriff tells him he's lost power. Then Danforth appears with explosives and a rifle grazing Alan's shoulder. The sheriff calmly explains Danforth didn't kill his wife, Leland did. Realizing this, Danforth tackles Leland through a window and sets off the explosives, destroying the store. Leland walks out unharmed, says Castle Rock wasn't his best, and tells Alan he'll marry Polly. He asks them to send greetings to their grandson Bob and leaves in his black car, heading to his next target.
Thanks for tuning in. Don't forget to subscribe, hit the bell icon, and stay connected with us.